Hello, and welcome to the virtual Scandinavia House in New York and to the second of our Nordic literature panels, Authors You Should Know, with this week's focus on Icelandic literature with the poetry collective, the Imposter Poets, moderated by the author and translator, Larissa Kyzer. As we already mentioned, this is the second of the series of 7 panels exploring literature of the Nordic regions. And next week on the 13th of October, we'll visit Finland with the moderator, Lola Rogers. In support of this event has been graciously provided by the Consulate General of Iceland in New York and Iceland Naturally. And media support of the series is provided by Europe Now, published by the Council of European Studies at Columbia University. I would like to introduce the moderator of this event right now. Larissa Kyzer is a writer and Icelandic literary translator. She was Princeton University's fall 2019 translator in residence and is a member of OSS, an Icelandic-based international literary collective, as well as American Literary Translators Association. Her translation of Kristin Eriksdóttir's A Fist or a Heart was awarded the American Scandinavian Foundation's 2019 Translation Prize, and she is the co-chair of PEN America's Translation Committee and runs the bi-monthly New York-based Women Plus in Translation reading series, Joe. Please welcome Larissa.
Thank you for having us, Kyle, and thanks for the introduction. I'm just going to start with introductions of each individual poet, and then they'll do a reading in Icelandic and English, and then we'll have the conversation after that. So I'm going to start by introducing Thora Hjörleifsdóttir, who is an Icelandic writer based in Reykjavik. Thora is the co-author of 3 poetry collections with the Imposter Poets. Her first novel, Magma, or Kvika, was published in Iceland in 2019 to critical and commercial acclaim. Magma is a poetic novel about love in the 21st century and how pornography and abuse have been normalized in intimate relationships. Magma has been picked up by Grove Atlantic in the USA and Picador in the UK and will be published in March 2021. So over to you, Thora.
Thank you. I'm Thora, and I am going to read for you a poem I wrote in 2017. And first I will read the Icelandic version and then an English translation done by Larissa Kyzer. Bölvun. Ég fór heimilið þitt, ber að neðan í karrígulum ullarsokkum. Ég neri mér utan í sófa, veggi, eldhúsáhöld. Tók utan hurðarhúna með raskinnunum með fleiri bakteríur á hurðarhúnum en klósettsetum. Núna á það svo sannarlega við heimilið þitt. Ég setti kodda þinn milli lærana á mér svo þegar þú reynir að hvílast, herjar mýrarlykt að vitunum. Tannburstan notaði ég til að greiða hár í söltum handakryggum. Ég snýtti mér í sum handklæðina, en alls ekki öll. Ég vil að þú efist skynjun þína. Ég vil að þú finnir hvernig ég ásæki þig. And for the English translation, Malice. I went around your house, naked from the waist down, but for curry yellow wool socks. I rubbed myself against the sofa, walls, your kitchen utensils, gripped doorknobs with my butt cheeks. As I understand it, there are more bacteria on doorknobs than toilet seats. This now is most certainly the case in your house. I stuck your pillow between my thighs so that when you're trying to rest, a pungent bog whiff assaults you. Your toothbrush I used to brush the hair of my salty armpits. I blew my nose in some of your towels, but definitely not all. I want you to question your perceptions. I want you to feel me hard on your heels. Thank you.
Thank you, Thora. think that's a great way to start us off. Next, I'd like to introduce Fríða Ísberg, who is an Icelandic author based in Reykjavik. Her short story collection, Ich, Klauði, came out in 2018 and is currently nominated for the 2020 Nordic Council Literature Prize, one of the most prestigious awards a Nordic author can win. Other works include poetry collection Slittforin, which came out in 2017, and Leðurjakkaveður, which came out in 2019. Fríða has twice been shortlisted for the Icelandic Women's Literature Prize for fiction and won the Icelandic Booksellers Award for Poetry in 2017. Her short fiction is forthcoming in the Southern Review and the Iowa Review, and actually Prism International. Over to you, Fríða.
Hi, I'm gonna read a poem from our first collection that we did together, the Imposter Poets. It's called I'm Not Raising My Hand, and refers to the fact that we were not waiting for someone to give us a chance to speak, but we were taking the words. So this poem is called Fullkomnun dauði, or Completion is Death. Fullkomnun dauði, þangað beinum við förinni, mjökum okkur hægt áfram saman. Gefum okkur olnbogaskot ef ein nemur staðar of lengi. Endastaður markmiðið, endastaður takmarkið. Og ef ein okkar rifjar upp muninn á markmiði og takmarki, öskrar önnur fullkomnun og hin nær aftur áttum. Austur, við mjökumst austur. Stoltar í öxlunum, stoltar í hökunum. Við rísum gegn sólinni áður en hún rís gegn okkur. And the translation is by Meg Matich. Completion is death. Completion is death. We turn our tracks toward it, edge forward together, nudge each other if one of us lingers too long. The destination is the limit. The destination is the goal. And if one of us raises the discrepancy between a goal and the limit, the others cry out, completion, and coax her back in line. East, we edge east. Proud in our shoulders, proud in our chins, we rise against the sun before it rises against us. Takk.
Thank you, Fríða. Next, I would like to introduce Mel Korka Olafsdóttir, who is a flautist and works as the program manager for music at the Harpa Concert Hall. Mel Korka has written poetry since she was a child and has published 2 poetry chapbooks, Teen Poems from 2000 and Love Poems from 2004, as well as various poems in the literary journal Starafik and the 3 collections co-authored by the Imposter Poets. Mel Korka graduated with a master's degree in creative writing from the University of Iceland in 2018. Her first full-length poetry collection, Here the Mountains Are Blue, was published in 2019.
Hi, I'm Mel Korka. I'm going to read for you a poem from the second collection. It's called Song of Celebration. And this is the final poem in this collection of the Imposter Poets. I will read it in Icelandic first. Hljómteppi. Stundum ég köttur margra lífa. Lít öxl og furða mig á draugalestinni sem ég leiði. Stundum ég steinvala í ástraumi, ávalari með hverri nýrri ferð, mýkri og langar að trúa fegurri. Og ég fagnaðarsöngur í þéttofnu hljómteppi. Dyr mínar ekki lengur lokaðar, öðrum til varnar. Já, ég fagnaðarsöngur, eins og þú. And the English translation is by Larissa. Here it goes. Tapestry of sound. Sometimes I'm a cat of many lives, looking back in amazement at the ghost train I conduct. Sometimes I'm a pebble in a stream, rounder with each new journey, softer and hopefully more beautiful. And I'm a song of celebration in a tightly woven tapestry of sound. My doors no longer closed for the safety of others. Yes, I am a song of celebration, just like you.
Thank you very much. Next, I will introduce Ragnheiður Harpa Leifsdóttir, who is an author and artist. Her multidisciplinary practice spans the fields of performance, visual arts, and writing. Her acclaimed poetry book, Lemons and Nightfall, was published in 2019, and she is co-author of 3 poetry collections by the Imposter Poets. Ragnheiður Harpa has been shortlisted for the Icelandic Performing Arts Award. Her work has been published in Turkey and staged in Reykjavik and in various festivals throughout Europe. She is intrigued by collaboration, ephemerality, and perception. Ragnheiður Harpa holds degrees in creative writing and performance making.
Hi, and thank you, Larissa, and all of you. I'll be reading a poem from our latest book, Nú sker ég netin mín, or Now I Cut My Ropes. We haven't made an English translation of this title, but it will come. I will be reading in Icelandic first and English, as has become the custom. Ósk mín til þín. Megi endanleikinn fylgja þér ævina alla, svo þú undrist kvöldbirtu ágústmánaðar og vatnið sem gusast úr krananum. Takir eftir æðunum í bláskelinni, finnir fyrir innsogi fjarðarins, andir að þér saltinu, bragðir sítrónuna í linsubeinasúpunni. Megi endanleikinn verða þér gjöf, sem þú sveipar þig í forstofunni áður en þú stígur út í rokið. And the English translation is by the wonderful Larissa Kyzer. My wish for you. May the end be with you all of your life, so you marvel at the brightness of August nights and the water that gushes from the tap. Notice the veins in a muscle, feel the inhalations of a fjord. Breathe in salt air, taste the tang of lemon in your lentil soup. May the end be a gift you wrap around yourself on the thresholds before stepping out into the storm. Thank you.
Thank you.
My dog, he wanted to come. Sorry.
So next, I'm going to introduce Sunna Dís Másdóttir, who is an author, poet, and literary critic and writing instructor. Sunna has co-authored 3 poetry collections with the Imposter Poets. She is one of Iceland's representatives in the prize committee for the Nordic Council Literature Prize. Sunna's poetry has been published in online literary magazine Stafik, and her short story, Summer House, recently appeared in Iceland Review. She's published articles and literary reviews in numerous newspapers and magazines in Iceland. Sunna holds degrees in English and creative writing. Thank you, Sunna.
Thank you. I seem to be having a little bit of a problem with sound, but I hope the video works okay for you guys. I'm going to read a poem from this second collection, Song of Celebration. I'm going to read it in Icelandic first. It's called Bogi. Krosslegðu ekki fótleggi, segir amma. Þú færð æðahnúta. En ég var í skátunum. Ég hnýti mína eigin hnúta, ríð mín eigin net. Tálka örvar. Yfir sakamálaþáttum vetrarins, ein ör fyrir hverja myrta konu. Réttu úr bakinu, segi ég systur minni, sittu gleið. Spenntu lífbeinið mót þeim eins og boga. And the English translation is done by Matich. It's called Bow. Don't cross your legs, my grandmother says. You'll get spider veins. But I was a Girl Scout. I knit my own knots, weave my own nets. I carve in winter over crime dramas, one arrow for each woman murdered. Sit up tall, I tell my sister, open your legs. Steady your pubis against them, taut like a bowstring. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then, let's see, we go to Thórdís Helgadóttir, who is the author of acclaimed short story collection Emperor Penguins and co-author of 2 poetry collections with the Imposter Poets. Her theatrical work has been staged at the Reykjavik City Theatre, where she was the 2019-2020 playwright in residence. Her short fiction has appeared widely, including in Iceland Review and Michigan Quarterly Review Mixtape, which is forthcoming. A former Fulbright scholar, Thórdís holds degrees in creative writing and philosophy.
Thank you, Larissa. I'm going to read a poem from our latest, Nú sker ég niður mín, in Icelandic first. Vindvera. Þá læri ég að rata húsið, brynni draumkonunni og geri gull úr drullu, eins og mér uppálagt. Vef saman efa við örvæntingu, flétta rangsælis eins og munkur sem hefur mist trúna en ekki augun eða hendurnar, eins og vinkona mín sagði daginn sem hárið losnaði af höfðinu á henni og féll á milli gólffjallanna. Ég bíð vonlaus í búk sem verpir ekki eggjum heldur fæðir með sprengingu og flóði frjórra vökva. Neyðist til að rúmast á þessum beinum, þessum þjattu, þungu beinum. Holdið verður krókaleiðir og syngur á siglingunni, en andinn ferðast á jöfnum hraða í loftlínu. Eftir sólarhring lendir hann með gylt stél, finnur mig í fjörunni, sólbakað grjót og hneggjar og hlær. And translated into English by Matich. Windbeast. So I learned to go about the house, feed the woman under dreams, and make gold from garbage, as instructed. Plead doubt and despair counterclockwise, like a monk who's lost his faith, but neither his eyes nor his hands, as my friend said the day her hair fell from her head and slipped between floorboards. I sit, hopeless, in a frame that doesn't lay eggs, but gives birth in a burst and a flood of fertile fluids. Forced to fit onto these bones, dense, heavy bones.
The flash veers of course and sings as it sails, but the spirit travels steadily as the crow flies. After a day, it lands, golden-tailed, stalks me to shore, boulders baked in sun, and nickers, and laughs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was really nice to hear you all read together. Just a small plug before we start chatting, but we have collected 12 poems from the three collectively written poetry collections, and Meg Matich and I, who did half of these translations tonight, are putting them out in a limited edition chapbook. So if you would like to pre-order that, it's not ready yet, but it will be. And I put that in the chat, as well as a link to the Svikaskáld's website, which has some information in English, and their manifesto, which was published on LitHub last year. So without further ado, I would love it if you all would talk a little bit about how the collective came together. It was founded in 2017, and you've published a book a year since then together, which I think is pretty amazing, plus 2 individual poetry collections by Ragnheiður Harpa and Melkorka. So would you like to talk about how you came to be as a collective?
I think maybe Ragnheiður Harpa or Fríða should take that, or Mel Korka. It was the 3 of you who got us started, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'll take that ball. So all of us were together in Masters of Creative Writing in the University of Iceland. And we somehow ran into, we felt that we all were running into a certain wall of perfection, that we saw our writing or text as something that could not be released without being absolutely perfect. And, you know, because writing is in a way so naked, it's a form which you cannot hide, you know, a nice lighting and, you know, kind of anything more than what is on the page. And we found ourselves kind of voicing these feelings of what later became the imposter poets, or the imposter syndrome, of waiting to find that sometime, someday soon, everyone will find out you have no idea what you're doing. And this is a very common feeling in every field, in every work, in everything you do. So we decided to kind of take on this feeling and go to a summer cabin for 1 weekend with a very tight schedule, with a lot of books, a lot of poetry, a lot of food, some wine, and write a book together that we would publish. And, you know, this is the most scary thing any of us had done ever, just to actually say this and then to do this. And we called somehow, we were 3 of us in a cafe deciding that we would do this, and called the girls that we somehow knew were on a similar vibe, I guess. And also the women that we admired, you know, we wanted to work with them. So we were like, what can we do to do that? So this group came together in a cabin, and by the way, we didn't really know each other very well. Some of us knew each other better than the others. Others had just kind of met a little bit, but all had been connected through writing and through sharing writing at a very early stage. So we were used to that. We knew what that was. And we came together in this cabin, and we wrote, and we read, and we wrote, and we read out loud text that we were so embarrassed to read, that I would never read out loud for anyone except these women. Text at all kinds of levels of being horrible and wonderful and, you know, everything. And then we gave ourselves deadlines for helping each other make the text good. You know, it wasn't over after the cabin. I think 2 months passed or so until we were ready with the poetry that would then go into the book and that process. So that, I think, is the beginning. Is there something you want to add, girls, to that?
I maybe wanna add that, because you said, I was thinking before, you said that we were kind of used to sharing texts and being quite vulnerable about it, but I I don't think that I had done it in that capacity before. I think I felt like more vulnerable in that cabin, like the first evening when we were sharing our texts that were maybe 2 or 3 hours old or something, even younger than that. I think I felt more vulnerable there than like giving birth. It felt like raw. But I also think that from that vulnerability and that whole trust exercise that whole trip was, we have built what we have today, which is just this deep trust. Yeah.
I think we all had our moments of doubt. I remember myself walking up to the hill above the cabin and calling my boyfriend and almost crying on the phone that I was so terrible compared to the others because they were all so good. And we all have these moments. And the wonderful thing about this group is that we sense when someone is going there and we just pick each other up. And this is a spirit that has just been with us from the beginning, which is quite incredible, actually, very powerful.
I would be interested in hearing you all talk a little bit more about what Melkorka has just said about picking each other up and kind of avoiding that trap of competition among peers. I think I've at least noticed this with women peers. It's not just restricted to women, but when you're in a small field or you're doing the same thing as someone who you see is also doing really well, and then there's this moment of like, oh, they're doing so good, and somehow that makes you feel bad instead of making you feel like proud of them. And I think that there's a lot to be overcome there. And I think it's very impressive that 6 of you all together have managed to do this without like a lot of intercompetition. So I would just love to hear you talk about like whether or not that just sort of happened naturally out of this like this trust and vulnerability that you're talking about, or if that's something that you kind of consciously are generating.
I think it happened naturally, and I think it is a natural thing. Really, yeah, it feels like that. Definitely, we never had to kind of discuss it not being in competition. It's just it's like a family bond somehow. It's something we don't question.
I think it comes up in the manifesto that you are lifted up by critics. You're relatively well received. And then you lift others up as well. So it feels like this sort of spirit that you have of like non-competitiveness, like lifting each other up, is sort of extended to the way that you interact with other artists around you. Would you say? Would you like to talk any about that, perhaps?
I hope it is, and I think it's something that we should teach in school, even to see someone else's success not as something that makes you less successful, but to see it as something inspiring. That person reached there. That's just a person. If that's something I want to do, I can be inspired by that movement. I think that's such a more healthy way to see, especially in the arts, to see everyone around you kind of blossom, you know. And if one person kind of blossoms, all the rest of the flowers start to open up in these different ways. And it takes courage to do that. And it's inspiring. It's inspiring to see, especially now speaking about women, because we're in a female collective, but to see all these amazing women do all these amazing things, it gives the others as well, what's the word? Leyfi.
Permission.
Permission to do the same. And that's why we should lift each other up, and we should, you know, talk about the other people's successes, because that, I don't know, I think that's the most fun of it and the most beautiful thing that there is.
Absolutely. I think permission was also the word that came to me because having a role model or somebody to look up to is a permission to be able to do exactly the same or a similar thing, you know. And just and I think also to add to that, it's just, I think the power of the collective and the power of the group has been underappreciated for such a long time, especially when it comes to writing, because being a writer has always been just like this lone wolf thing. And yeah, I don't know. There's something incredibly empowering about writing with others and feeling this sense of community and being like in a team with your fellow writers instead of competing with them.
I think it also has to do with sort of our methods, because we work together kind of, organically, and while we write, each poet writes her own poems separately, but we read them to each other while they're still in works in progress, and then we steal lines from each other, and we're sort of involved with each other in the raw stage, which I think is also kind of trust building, and you can watch each other's work evolve, and I think it's very healthy to like knock the perfectionist off your shoulder, where you're all just in it together, like the creative process, and it's messy and it's imperfect, and then you see the finished product. So I think, yeah.
Oh, sorry, got it.
Yeah, I wanted to say that I think that our creative battle has always been against perfectionism, because like Fríða said in her poem so well, that when you want to be perfect, that's when you reach an end point. That's where you go no further. Then you're done. So we, as we see it, that like perfection shouldn't be what you aim at when you're making art, whatever art or whatever you're doing with your life. But you should, try to do the best that you can do at the moment, and pull your friends with you, and take all the best people on the journey with you, and make the most of your situation. So yeah, I think also because writing can get so lonely, and it's just so much more fun to have your group. And it's a little crazy making, I find it, where you get no feedback and you just stare at the same computer screen all day, and you lose your judgment in what you're doing. And I think just the friendship aspect of it, just so good for the soul, apart from the work. Yeah, just to stay mentally healthy as a writer, I think.
Would you all like to discuss a little or describe a little bit the way that you work? Because I think part of, or one of the many things that's very interesting about the way that you work together is that you're collectively authoring these collections. I cannot seem to stop doing that, but but you're writing your own poems in those collections, and you maintain such very distinct voices. And so I'd love you to just describe for people how you work together, and then also maybe talk a little bit about the ways in which working together has sort of changed your writing, or like maybe even made you more different from everybody else that you're writing next to. Like, how has it kind of helped you refine your own personal voice?
I think maybe if I start, I think one of the first things that we discussed was whether we should actually like sign our poems in the published book, or if we should just allow the text to be independent and just kind of weave together in their own way. But we quite quickly, I think, decided that we wanted to keep like the authors' names visible, so we could you can kind of follow the different voices throughout the book. But they're not in the printed books. They're just, you can look them up in the back, but it's a whole collection without the author's names on the page. But I think it's been so freeing and just such a source of joy for me, this trust that we have and these methods that we use, where we usually come to a place, it's a place and a time for me. We go somewhere together, and we bring a lot of books with us, and we bring something to the table that we've been thinking about or mulling over, or just something that we kind of feel invested in at that time. And we have this like initial conversation where we kind of check into ourselves and into the place and the time and this space that we're creating between us. And then we just start writing. And I think for me, like I think it's the most kind of almost magical thing of the experience is that first share after we've kind of read some poetry together and aired our thoughts a bit, where you come with something really raw and just look what it is. What did you make? Do they like, is this a dialogue? Is it a conversation? What are we doing? And it's freeing for me. It's like it's joyous in a way to just feel that unhindered and just be able to share and borrow from the rest of them. If Thora brings something, a thought or a phrase or a title or a bird. I remember when we were in Flatey, we were surrounded by birds. It was that time of the year. And I think like almost every poem we wrote had a bird in it in one way or another. And we had to slaughter quite a few of them before we went to print. But I think that's like the most revolutionary aspect of our work for me.
And I would also like to add that we work with a very strict time frame, so that when we come together and when we're writing together, we don't bring any baggage that we already have. Like it's not allowed to bring poetry that you've kind of worked on and it's, you think it's okay and you read it to the group. You have to, you just bring your blank notebook and start, because you're cheating if you bring something that you've worked on a little bit before. It's okay if it's been in your unconscious, but not if it's on the page. And and we have these time frames where we say like, okay, we will, and we go to, and we also, another important thing that we do, we always exit our lives. We're never in our, regular daily routine, and we all have, like families and jobs and responsibilities that we have to take care of. But when we come together to write together, it's like that. It's like we unplug, the multi-cable. That's like there's like one cable to the wall, and then there are like several like electrical faucets connected to it. You like take it all out, and there's just this one thing that goes in, and that's just being present and writing and listening and taking in what your friends are doing and how you can contribute to it. So that, and then when we come, because we are, busy women, we don't have, months on end to work on a manuscript. We come together, we write, and then the rule is that, after a writing session, you don't really add anything new. You can, polish the work that you've already done, but you're not going to go home and be like, I have this like really nice thing that I've thought about thoroughly. So I think it's also just, the trust in tapping into the collective consciousness and working with that energy that you have at the moment. So so that's something we do. And food, there has to be nice food. We always eat the best food when we're together. So, you can't really, it's not supposed to be painful, and it's not supposed to be, a struggle to write together. You come together and it's a celebration with, friendship and poetry and food and and when you are, feeling your best, that's when your best work comes. Or that's how it works in my opinion. And that has really applied for my writing later on, because I really don't like the idea of the anguished author who is in constant pain. Because for me, like I'm like a giant baby. I need to be well slept, had my food, and then I can, get to work. But if I don't get my sleep and my food, nothing happens. So I think that has been the most valuable lesson in becoming, an artist. That is just, learning that you have to take care of yourself and your environment to be and take the time and take your time seriously when you have it and make the most of it.
I think Thora is touching a key maybe within our collective, and it's this friendship, you know, this female friendship that we talked a lot about in our, especially in the last one, is the power that comes from female friendship and how special that is. And I have a lot of friends who are women that actually think that that's the most valuable relationships they have, much more valuable than their partners in love, because there's some very, very special energy that comes from that.
So Fríða told a story the other day that I wanted to touch on because I thought it was super interesting. And I actually might just ask you to tell the story, Fríða, but about how, because I was thinking about your influence as a collective and how you sort of started as like a group that was self-publishing, you just did this very scrappy, and now I feel like you have a lot of influence on writers and young writers who are up and coming. And you were talking about, I believe it was a college class, talking about art collectives and people starting to talk about the Svikaskáld and also how they were writing like poems in the style of the Svikaskáld. And I was just wondering if you would like to talk about, like, I mean, I thought that was kind of amazing, like just how that feels, or just like what you sort of perceive the collective's like greater influence outside of the group as being.
Yeah, I mean, it was very. Is it working, my camera? Or, yeah. So yeah, I thought it was very, very fun to hear. Obviously, that the project assignment was to you know, to get to know some collective, and then like 3 or 4 came up in the class with the Imposter Poets. And we're not really seeing a lot of collectives forming right now. I don't think so. But it's definitely like, we hope obviously that this idea that a group can work together and you know, and that you can get this empowerment through the group, that this idea manifests itself in other, you know, generations, obviously. But I wanted to like add before that it was also like, for me at least, I feel like it's very much a part of our identity that we were in some way in defiance against the norm. You know, we were a collective against the individual, and we were also in the defiant against the authorship, that it has to be individual, the authorship, that it cannot be collective. So also when we're talking about stealing, you know, svik is the word is not only an imposter, but it's also a betrayal. And to shirk, or to like be defiant, or like to, yeah, basically, I don't know, you probably have a better definition.
No, you got it great. You're doing great.
So I think we also have created this permission within the group to svíkjast, which is to betray some norm, and we use it so often in all situations. Like when we feel bad about something that we think we said, when we think we were rude, or when we think that we didn't do good enough, or what, like we're always encouraging each other to, you know, betray that norm of you know, and giving us permission to steal from another, steal words from one another, to to do something different and new, and that is a constant source of positive rebellion, I say. It's so freeing to have a group that is consciously trying to be punk, but within a very safe, healthy environment. So, for example, our first collection, the defiance in that norm was that it was not supposed to be perfect. It was not supposed to be, polished or perfect or ready for the world. It was just our goal initially was to publish it within 1 month, which became 3 months, but it was still pretty raw. And so that's also the permission to have something raw and not perfect. Yeah.
So it's a kind of protest against the females, being apologetic. So we have this, one of our phrases is never sorry. So whenever one of us is like, oh, sorry, girls, I haven't had time, never sorry. Which is really helpful often.
Can I add to that? I think when you asked the question on, because as Mel Korka and Fríða are coming for touching, I think it has a lot of influence to our voice, but our individuality, but more to kind of a reminder or attitude towards life, and and to the norms that we're questioning. And it's okay to betray. I'm tired. I'm not going to come to that party. Or, I said this to my grandmother, but I'm not sorry, it's okay. And also, when we were first thinking of this and kind of throughout our process, we think of Svikaskáld, this kind of collectives, as something that we hope other people will steal. That other people can take whatever they want from it, and that it may be, whatever they want, if they want the food or the, the books or a line from the poetry or anything, or the way we work, please take it and steal it and make it your own, because we want it to be kind of like a movement, something that like a ripple in water that kind of droplets and keeps going somewhere. Yeah, I think I wanted to touch on that because I feel it has this effect on me, in my life and in my how I am at the store. I'm not sorry. I didn't bring it back. I don't care. When that happens.
I think about that a lot, actually. I recently tried to document all the times that I had said sorry for just random things, and I ended up with a 7-page poem it was just a list of things I had said sorry for. And I haven't stopped saying sorry, but I have started thinking about it more. So I feel like that's the first step. I'm gonna just scroll through and see in the chat what people have been asking about. And if you have questions you would like to ask, now is the time. Somebody asks, I'm curious if outside of the generative retreats you do as a group, if you are in constant contact or see each other regularly and read your work to each other often. I love the idea of exiting life and wonder about sustaining the creative group within life.
We have a studio together and we are lucky that we meet there. And sometimes we meet in the studio. Yeah, in our old house. Thora is there right now. You can see the wallpaper. But I think that's where we mostly meet. We somehow, because of how we are friends, we meet through writing, mostly, or something, some kind of creative work.
But I think we should also add to that we are expanding our business quite a lot these days. So we're not only doing our poetry collections, but we also, like Ragnar said, we work in the same workspace. We are hosting, we have a reading series, poetry reading series every month, every third Thursday of the month. We have a poetry night and have had that for over a year now. where we invite people, both established authors and young authors and new authors, and all kinds of voices. We also host workshops for kids. We've hosted also programs or like on Poetry Day. We're doing a radio show right now, or like a radio play. And what else have we've been doing?
Wasn't there a crime, like?
Oh God.
Okay, we'll just leave that up.
But this is another source of joy for us. We're branching out. Thora has some more information on this, I think.
Yeah, because in Iceland we have a very big we have a tradition for crime novels. Nordic Noir is the genre, and they have and we none of us have written crime novels or anything of the sort. We are all humble poets, but we were this spring, like early this year, we had a meeting with an acclaimed Icelandic crime novelist who was planning a festival here, like it's called like Nordic Noir, like Iceland crime fiction thingamajiggies. And initially they wanted to have a poetry like crime reading night. That sounded so exciting, and we were like, yes, we would host it. And all of the crime writers were secretly poets, because we know they are, like, they're poets in the closet, but they write, crime fiction to, pay the bills. And so they were going to come here, like, I don't know, there was like Ian Rankin and like some like famous like best-selling authors from the big wide world were coming here to partake in the festival. And then they were going to come to our poetry night and read some crime poetry. And I don't know, I think we were like talking with, his name is Ragnar, the Icelandic writer.
Jónasson.
Ragnar.
Jónasson.
Yes, Jónasson. And he was like asking us like, yeah, so could you do this? And because, yeah, I think that I have a bit of an entrepreneur in myself. So I asked him like, will there be a party? And he said, yes, there will be a party. And I was like, are we going to be invited? And he said, yes, of course, you will be invited. And it's going to be so much fun. And then he added like, and then we're going to take the most like famous authors and like the most fun people out to the countryside to this like, to the most fancy hotel in the countryside of Iceland, and have like a party there, like stay the night, have good dinner, like have some fun. And I love food, like we said, we talked about this earlier tonight. And I was like, will there be a murder mystery? And we have like all of the crime writers and like the most acclaimed crime writers in the world coming to Iceland to do this. And he was like, no, we hadn't really thought about a murder mystery. And I was like, we will do a murder mystery. Don't worry. We will do a murder mystery for dinner and a room at the fancy hotel. And he was like, yes, sounds good. And we were all like, so at the moment we are planning a murder mystery for, I forget the names of the writers.
Yeah. Best-selling authors worldwide.
It was a big list.
Yeah. We are planning a murder mystery for them.
We're not really planning a murder mystery. We're Googling a murder mystery.
That was how to write a murder mystery.
I think I think this is like very much in the spirit of the collective, and I look forward to it. I hope that it makes it out of the fancy party, because I would play this game, and I do not generally play murder mystery games. Thank you for that. Just to switch gears just slightly, Jean would like to know, what are some of the books you brought to your first cabin weekend?
Ooh,
I thought that might be a fun one.
Mary Oliver, I think, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. I'm still crying from that.
Oh, I can't remember. We brought a lot, but I feel like for me, the Somali poet who wrote the poetry that Beyonce.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I forget names too.
Yeah, I remember.
Talking about this one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Beautiful things than Beyonce. Is that?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's another one, but I was thinking of something about my mother birth. Do you remember the title, Fríða?
Teaching my mother to give birth.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
We've also been asked about the translation process, which in terms of the poetry is rather new, at least for me and some of you. But I mean, I know how that felt for me, but I've worked with many of you on short stories, and then we started translating the poems for this event, and then for the chapbook. Would you like to talk about the process of being translated? It doesn't have to be with me. It could be with anyone that you've been translated by.
I think the beauty of translation for me is to see your poem kind of grow in a different color. It's somehow, translation can, when good, I don't know, open up a poem in a different way. So even you as an author can see it differently. And I think that is a very special gift for an author to experience.
And you said you had, or your bio said that you'd had work translated into Turkish. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was interesting for me because I could not read Turkish.
Yeah. So I mean,
I could hear it, and that was quite interesting to experience. Yeah.
How about anybody else? I don't mean to put you on this. I realize it puts a little bit on the spot. It doesn't have to be like, this was great for me, but but how does, like, in terms of watching your work be sort of manifested in a different form, in a different language, that sort of, I do believe it's collaboration. I always think about translation as a collaboration. So it seems very much in the spirit of what you do, but it is also different when you're sort of collaborating on something, but still writing your own work, and then having somebody else collaborate on your poem.
For me, I really enjoyed it. And I mean, it's a privilege that we're able to read and understand the English translations. Just like Ragnheiður said, you don't really have that access to a lot of other languages. So it's it's really fun. And I found like new meanings or kind of aspects. I don't know, really, I'm searching for a word here. In both of my poems that I hadn't really paid much attention to before. They're a tiny bit different, but still kind of tap into that same source feeling that I was going for. Or yes, it's beautiful to see it come to life in another language, I feel.
For me, it was also like, I remember the first time that I got a translated text a few years back. And I remember this kind of realization that I was not in a cab and the translator was not the cab driver, but we were like in this car together, and it was just as much, you know, the translator's work as mine all of a sudden. And I was not like controlling where we were heading. Like we had to kind of do this collaboratively, and also just like letting go that the authorship of the translation is, you know, you have to respect that. But it is, of course, you know, it's definitely harder in English when you understand so well, like the nuances. And like for me, I maybe have some feeling for a word that is completely different for you as a native English speaker. But it's much easier to let go of the text when it's, you know, in Danish or, you know, in Ukrainian, for example, and you just don't know anything, and you just have to trust very blindly.
Mm-hmm. I've talked to translators from Icelandic to other languages, to such as, you know, Czech, for instance, and then the relationships are so different, and it's not like closer or less close. It's nothing like that. It's just that the fact that the translation can't be read by the author, it just creates like a vastly different dynamic, which is, I think it's very interesting. I've talked to translators who have been very surprised that I have as much contact with authors as I do, and yeah, I think it's a nice aspect of the job. I also think it's interesting how like different translators can have, you know, different, like Meg and I split up your poems, and so I think like there are different styles of translation, and you can kind of see that in the way that, you know, your poems were respectively translated. So I think that's also an interesting aspect.
There's another thing that I want to add with translators and for us, because we are Icelandic and we come and we belong to a micro nationality, and our language is a micro, like there are 330,000 people in Iceland. It's like a small suburb of like a foreign city that you know, that holds that many people together. But we are a whole nation that has its own language, and for us, because there are so few people who speak the language, there's so much at stake to get a good translation and to get it just right. And for me, for example, I have a novel coming out in the States next year, translated by Matich, who translated some of the poems that you have heard today. And we had such a good collaboration working on it. And I think that I was sometimes a bit obnoxious when we were working together, because I was like, this is the text that people are going to read. Nobody is going to read the original, like maybe a few hundred or maybe 1,000 people will do that. But the English translation is the text that other translators are going to read and work on, like in the future when it gets published into other languages. So, yeah, so for us here in Iceland, like getting good translators is the biggest gift that we can have and for like just getting to know Larissa and Meg, who are so good at Icelandic and have such good feel for the language and are so communicative, and you know, we've had such a good collaboration working together, finding the right translation. It's been so valuable for us. So thank you. You are appreciated.
Well, it's a gift to work with people like you. Yeah, no, it's an exciting thing, and it's really rewarding. It's really rewarding. Let's see, what time is it? We have a couple more questions for you all. Oh, well, I think this could possibly have some interesting answers. Do you ever feel like writing in English instead?
No.
I had a feeling. Would you like to talk about why?
Okay, well, I lived in Sweden when I was a teenager, and I picked up Swedish quite quickly, and I speak Swedish fluently today. But during that time when I still lived there, I tried writing in Swedish. And I really enjoyed that because as a non-native speaker, you come to the language with like just a different access point, really. And I found words interesting that my Swedish peers didn't really react to much, because they told me something. They were closely related to the Icelandic or completely different from the Icelandic or something. So I dabbled in that a bit, and I really enjoyed it. But I don't know. I think I like speak and read English quite well, but I really don't feel that like I can. No, it's much too much a non-native language for me to write in, I think.
I remember, if I can add to that, I've been writing book reviews for a British reviewer, and I think it took me 1 month to write a 400-word review on a novel. And it's just because you don't have, you cannot sound very smart when it's not your first language. And it's just like you're trying so much to sound just a little bit intelligent or intellectual. And it's just, you don't have, that kind of feeling for English. You don't have that, kind of, you cannot be very witty, that's for me at least. Yeah.
I think if I were to write a pop song, I would only be able to write that in English. I think it's something to do with, how I listen to music or how I think of song, and I would have to do it in English. But I love seeing people come into a language, like a good friend of Svikaskáld, Jakub. He's from Poland, and Fríða has been going over his work, and he writes. And because we've heard he's done a few readings at our poetry nights, and he's writing in Icelandic, and he's lived here for a few years, and his, like Sunna was describing, his kind of entrance into the language is so different, and he sees words just like a poet kind of is practicing to do. We're always practicing to see the language, not to fall into the traps that are behind the words or the sentences, or kind of to see a bit deeper than what the words or what kind of community or our old teacher who taught all of us, his name was Sigurður Pálsson, and he spoke about this: do not fall into the trap of language. And I think as someone who comes into language, being in a new space, it's harder for them to fall into these traps, because they kind of see it in a different way. So it could be an interesting challenge for us girls to write a pop song in English, or to go to an English kind of space and
We'll do the murder mystery in English.
That's
has to be in English.
It could be a murder musical.
Oh my God!
Yeah, that's it. That's it. There's music. I would do that. Well, I don't want to do it, but I want to watch it. I want to watch it, definitely. I'm just trying to see if I missed anything. I think we're coming to the last tail end. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you would like to touch on? Last thoughts? Final observations? A brilliant quote that you love?
I think just a very deep thank you to you and to Kyle and to everyone who was listening, and thank you for your comments. We look forward to reading through them later.
Yes.
And to please be in touch if there's anything that you want to ask for or curious about. Then our website is svikaskáld.com, and there's an email link to that. Just thank you so much for taking your time for this. We've enjoyed it a lot.
Oh, yes. And so the Svikaskáld website is in the chat. And the also, if you want to see the chapbook, it's still in progress, but it's fandthorn.com. We took 2 Icelandic characters and we took the ones that are unique and also can be pronounced with an English accent. So fandthorn.com, that's in the chat. And then I also saw, just as I'm looking at this scroll up past me, I'm not great at reading the chats. Somebody was asking about advice for an aspiring translator into Icelandic, and I just wanted to say I have so many thoughts on this. So find me through the. I will put up a way for you to find me in the chat, but email me because it'll be longer than we have. I have lots of thoughts on this. And that will be, and I will give you all of them if you would like. We need more. So yeah, I guess other than that, people have also been asking about, yeah, aldrei sorry, never sorry.
Aldrei sorry.
Aldrei sorry.
Yeah.
I can add to that. Me and Thora, we were part of a volleyball.
Yeah.
We have never played volleyball, and we're very, very bad at volleyball. Very, very bad.
We were the worst team. We were the worst volleyball team that has ever played anywhere. And the motto of
was
the
our
team
motto.
was, yeah.
In the volleyball team. We kind of went in a circle. We were like, aldrei sorry. So you can take that on, you know, do volleyball, do whatever you're bad at, and just never be sorry.
I love that.
Well, thank you so much, Larissa and the ladies. Thank you. This was fantastic. Very, very inspiring talk. We appreciate it very, very much. So please join us next week when we go to Finland with 4 fantastic authors and the translator Lola Rogers. There's a little bit of everything in that one. There is a crime author, so maybe he's actually coming to your murder mystery party as well. So I'll have to ask him when I talk to him next week. But so please visit Scandinavia.org for everything that we have to offer. We have plenty of film screenings, lectures and literary events, children's workshops. So please do visit us again. And thank you, and please stay safe. Good night. Or bye.
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 Bye.